I'm Kim Lohman, and I'm the daughter of Al Lohman from the infamous radio team Lohman and Barkley. And I'm talking to the most incredibly talented Dick Whittington. How you doing, Dick?
I'm doing great, and after that introduction, I'm doing even better than that. Thank you, honey. It's good seeing you.
You're legendary, sir. You are
and so
quite
is your
a
dad.
talent.
Thank you.
So when was the first time you met these guys? When was the first time you met my dad?
Oh, well, both of them, of course. We all worked, and it was Roger Barkley who hired both of us, Al for the morning and me for the afternoon. And so we've known each other for all of these years. What's that, 65, 66 years, really.
Wow.
They're no longer with us, but we've known each other. And I think that it was a close relationship in its way.
Oh, my dad loved you. Oh, he always was talking about you.
Well, you have me going there, and I didn't want that. I don't have to tell you about your dad, Kim. I will say that most of us in radio are extroverted introverts. And as a consequence of that, what fascinated me about this interview, and only you can answer the question, I knew him as a professional person. As you know, your father, to me, was very tight-lipped. He never really delved into his family life or any other life. It's only because he was from Iowa, and all Iowans are alike. They don't
so true.
There's not much to laugh about in Iowa, so I never really knew him.
I mean, how many cow jokes can you tell, right?
Yeah. What kind of a man was he? Let me ask the question.
My dad was, which was really interesting. My dad was the type of person that in the outside world, he appeared extremely extroverted, very on, loved laughing, and when he loved, he really loved like you and a few of his friends he was very, very intense with, but he didn't share his emotions very often. He was very, even with his family, he was, he felt deeply, but he didn't know how to express it. And what's really interesting is he always said that about Roger. And my dad was doing the same thing as Roger. They just, I think they felt the world really intensely, but they were raised in a world that you just didn't express it, Now, when he got older, he definitely did. But the guy I grew up, oh my God, we laughed our tuckuses off, I mean, he just could be so insanely funny.
Yes.
That we spent a lot of time laughing, but to get to know him, like, I don't know a lot of my relatives. I don't know a lot about his background. And through doing this documentary, I found out a lot. I do know he considered you one of his favorite people on the planet. He just adored you. And I remember many hours him talking to you on the phone.
Yeah, that's all very true, very true. I think I can match that at least. I do not cry much. I whine a great deal, but I don't cry much. When I got the news about your father, that's the first time I cried, and it was one of those cathartic cries where you just got rid of everything that you felt terrible about, all of the mistakes you made, and maybe a few people that you hurt. I think all of that came out when I cried over your father. I was very proud of crying over him. I mean,
I think that's wonderful. I mean, that touches me deeply. He touched a lot of people, and I didn't realize how many people he touched. Because when you're a kid, like your family, you hear them on the radio, and they come home, and if you can, complain, you hang, you do the vacay, you do all these wonderful things, but you don't really understand the day-to-day. Now, did you guys do publicity stunts or anything like that together because you were at KLAC at the same time as well, right?
Yes, at KLAC. We started at KLAC, yes.
So did you guys do any of the publicity stunts together, or were you just?
No, actually, Kim, when I think about it, we really didn't know each other. We knew each other. I probably knew Roger better simply because he was the program director, and I might add, the best.
I heard he was infamous. I heard he was infamous. People loved him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because he knew how to handle you. I am not known or wasn't known as having the best temperament in the world. I was,
You were entertaining.
well, but I was also somewhat of a diva. And Roger, Roger had that ability of coming up to you, put his arm around you, and just say, Dick, you know what we have to do here and what my job is. And let's just calm down a little bit. And he was always that way with me.
I
So
love that.
I, that's the way he was. That's the way Roger was.
Roger was a very gentle soul.
Yeah.
Very gentle.
Yes.
You a diva? I just thought you were bold.
No, I have somewhat of a temperament. You wouldn't know that. But no, I did. And it was all due to my insecurity. I also feel that radio people, basically, to be any good at it, you have to be terribly insecure. And I always felt in my mind that your dad was like me in that sense. We were insecure. That's about the only intimate thing we've ever admitted to each other, as I remember.
One, I think that, and two, I think you both had very bold personalities. My dad, where I think Roger was more down to earth in some ways. I mean, a lot of ways actually, and such a talent. I mean, I'm very, very underrated. How, I mean, especially when I'm listening to all these hundreds of hours of tapes, it's you really can hear how talented he was.
Yes.
But I think my dad had a lot in common with you in that sense. I mean, very insecure, very bold. It's not a bad thing. You're so talented.
Oh.
Hey, what out of all the publicity things? Because back then they did so many publicity stunts. You know, my dad and Roger at the Rose Bowl with fans hitting each other in the tuchuses with towels, and their dress. My dad's dressed as a spaceman, and spraying champagne all over everybody. But what was one of your favorite publicity stunts that you did?
Well, the invasion of Catalina, where all of the listenership joined me as General MacArthur Whittington, and we invaded Catalina only because at that point in time there was not a war that we had won in over 100 years, and somebody had to do something. That was one of my favorites.
Oh my God, that is brilliant! How many people went with you?
Well, I am a lovely crowd estimator. I would say 100,000, maybe. No, about overall 500 people.
Oh my God, that's brilliant!
They all dressed in the war of their choices, so we went everywhere from the original war back when Jesus was, and
that's so
up to the present. So it was funny to watch. It really was. In fact, I think Channel 4 covered it. Kelly Lang.
Oh, I love that.
Kelly Lang. Yeah,
what station were you at?
I'm sorry, honey?
What station were you at?
Where was I? Oh, KGIL, yeah. I've worked so many. That's but KGIL at that time.
Now do you miss all that?
No, not a bit.
Really?
No, in fact, I don't even recognize that person from back there.
Well, that's interesting.
I think your father and I probably would have been even closer, and we were toward the end. We really were. We could talk to each other, not anything personal. You know, I knew Marianne. I talked to your mother, of course.
My mom was much more like her whole being was on her sleeve. You know, my mom was much more like that.
Yes, yes. Oh, she was a marvelous woman. When your brother moved Marianne out,
yeah.
of course.
My brother,
Branson, Missouri, right? Isn't that
Branson? Yeah, and then my mom lived over there as well. She was pretty fragile by the end.
Yeah.
She would call.
She would call, and we would talk maybe for hours.
Oh, no.
It was just a lovely experience.
That's so nice.
Yes,
that's so, yeah, you know, my dad enjoyed going over there. He wouldn't go back. They kept, you know, once the team broke up and years later, my brother moved back there. There were actually some theaters that wanted my dad to go over there, and he wouldn't go. He would not go. He did not want to go back to the Midwest. He really had a thing about that. He wanted to be in LA or near LA. And I always thought, boy, he would have just shined. It would have been just such a different thing for him to do, because there were so many transplants over there that actually remembered all of the bits and all of the things, you know?
Really?
And he had that gorgeous voice. I, of course, was not blessed with that voice, but he had such a gorgeous voice. All of you guys did that. They resonated on the air, you know?
Yeah. Did you know your father wanted to be a singer? And
Yes.
for a while sang in the army down in Panama?
Well, I heard about his wild antics in Panama.
Oh,
But was he?
much.
Oh my goodness! They threw him down in Panama because the Korean War was over, and they didn't know what to do with him. And he was terrible, like terrible. He was always going AWOL, or they kept making him clean the barracks with toothbrushes, and so they sent him down to Panama with his own radio show, where he was quite popular, I guess, with the ladies back then.
Really? Yeah.
And then he, before that, was in a quartet that was on the Ed Sullivan Show, which I had no idea. They were like a barbershop quartet.
No kidding. I didn't know that. No.
It's amazing when you dig up the stuff about your relatives.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was on Ed Sullivan, and it just surprised the heck out of us, because yet something else my dad didn't speak about, you know? I mean, which is, I wish I heard more of those stories, you know?
Well, I think I have an answer to that, because I can relate to a degree. Sometimes you're afraid to do that simply because you don't want people thinking that you're immodest. And Al was very much that way, and your father, I should say. He really didn't want to accept plaudits, even though, and I would do that once in a while. You know, I say, that was I stole a line from him once, and he heard it.
What'd you steal?
I can't remember the line. It was such a good line, and I was driving, etc. But we got into all of that. I don't think we're any different than television people. I'm sure they have the same types of fears and insecurities and butterflies in the stomach before you go on, all of that. And he had, we could talk about that. But it was as a man that, to me, that I liked him.
And like I said, he was he just thought you were so talented. He just thought there are certain people my dad talked about that, like, he just opened up, and you were one of them. He just thought you were so talented, and he so was crazy about you. That there was a weekend you all went to Oceana, and Perry Allen was there, and Gary Suggs and yourself.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, my dad had the photo of you guys. He kept that photo. It was everywhere he went. He just loved spending that time with you guys.
I took him around in the car to show him the various sites. This is a very suburban area, very small county. And so he sat in the rider's seat, and I was driving him, showing him this and showing him that. And we were out in the country by this time, and he said, "Can you stop for a minute?" I said, "Yeah." And there was a hill that we climbed up. And when we got to the top of the hill, we looked down on this lush green valley that is pretty much the Central Coast, grapes primarily. And so we didn't say anything to each other. And as we were gazing down, your father kind of mumbled in a way, "This deserves some kind of a tribute." So he unzipped, and following his lead, I unzipped. And we formed, we just did it. I mean, we just started to do it. If this is not tasteful, you can edit this out. But
it's hilarious.
We had a great stream, strong, steady stream. We crossed. And I think I blurted out at the time, "Look, I think we're making a rainbow." And your father said, "And I hear Judy Garland singing." And then I said, "Perhaps the Wizard of Oz might be there too." Leading Wizard of Oz, he asks. I said, yeah, the wizard, Joe Biden. Then I looked over at him and I said to him, there never will be Lohman and Whittington, will there? And he just smiled, and that was the end of the story.
Oh my God, it's
But
brilliant.
it was fun
It's
because
brilliant.
it's disgusting and tasteless, but it nevertheless made me laugh.
It happened though, and that's the point. It's
Yes,
like,
it is indeed.
so you had a bonding moment. I mean, not many people can share their screen together, Oh my God. So to me, when I look back at the 60s and 70s, and I think of Lohman and Barkley, yourself, I mean, you guys were so influential to so many people. I mean, radio is not the same now, obviously, but it was much more poignant in people's lives.
Mhm.
You don't miss that period of time at all?
No, you
That's
can't go back.
interesting.
You can't go back because the reason I think I'm living as long as I'm living, which is not,
Which is great.
no, well, it is, but it isn't because you're paying. I'm not a great believer in heaven and hell and that sort of thing, but I do believe that they keep you on earth, they being Jesus and God. They kept us on earth in order to remind us of all of the sins that we have committed over the many, many years, the people that we hurt,
Oh,
perhaps people we ignored, all of the terrible things that a human being can do. So I'm living this long and probably have another 102 years to go to be reminded and to be punished. By these,
oh,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, I do believe that. I really do. So um, I don't think that Al and I ever remonstrated either way about that. We talked about sins, but nothing personal. Nothing personal.
no, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also because you guys were from a different era too. I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, you know, part of my dad loving to perform was that it was almost like an alter ego, in the sense of he could be this bodacious person. And Lohman and Barkley sure as hell did some bodacious type crazy stuff. But it was safe because it wasn't who he really was, and I think that I don't know if that's generational or just from being born in the 30s. I don't know. I don't, or like you said, being from Iowa, I mean, every time I talk, and then that's a whole story in itself. I went back there years ago to see my aunt, my dad's sister, and we were driving from Sioux Falls, South Dakota to Omaha, Nebraska for me to take a flight to come back home. And my dad said, you gotta see my childhood homes. So that's great. So I thought there'd be like 2, 3, maybe houses, right? No, we saw 20. And that wasn't all of them. They moved constantly. Now, I personally think they were running from the law. I mean, I don't see anybody moving that, but supposedly to my aunt, my grandma would get bored and she'd go, let's move again. And they were everywhere. I didn't know that. I was an adult, and before I found out that they had that many childhood homes. I mean, it's just, I think that's the type of stuff that made him who he was,
Mhm. Yeah, and I relate that too. I don't think I was in the same school more than a year, and you become a touch and go person, and that perhaps could explain why we are and why he was the way he was. It was very difficult to connect with people when you knew that you were going to be moving again. And
Now, why did you move so often?
well, I was with this during the Great Depression. This is my mother just couldn't afford us, and so we were sent down in Delaware to my grandmother and grandfather's place to my sister and myself. And they were having very tough times, of course. The Great Depression, there was little food. My grandfather would go out and shoot rabbits or muskrats.
Oh,
And that would
wow.
be the meat. Yeah, it really was. And most people, there aren't too many left, I guess, don't remember how awful the Great Depression was. And I knew in my mind, even I was very young, I knew that it was a great burden upon them because nobody was working in the entire town. The town had 350 people, and none of them worked.
Wow.
But we did, we did supply each other. My grandfather had a garden. He was a wonderful farmer at one time, and had a truck garden. And so we would then go around the town and with little bags of fruits and vegetables, whatever he was growing. So we did, and other people did that for us. So we did have that, but it does make you terribly insecure, terribly insecure because you don't want to make friends because you know you're going to have to leave. And we had to. We moved around from my grandmother and grandfather, and it got to a point where you learn to live within yourself. And that was my story. And I thought about this because I knew we were going to do this. I think Al, your father, I thought I had to remind you of that, by the way. Al, your father. I'm sorry, stupid. Idiotic.
Oh,
That really was. But I think we shared that, but in different ways. But if I would cuss, for example, about something, he would look over it and give me a look, as maybe he
he
did
did.
with you.
For a man that had potty mouth, and trust me, that man, and maybe I gave him a lot of reasons to have a potty mouth, okay, because I was kind of a wild child growing up. My dad did not like foul language in comedy. He found that to be lowbrow humor. He hated it. He thought that we saw Mort Saul many times, and Mort Saul did some routine. I don't remember what it was, but he used a lot of language. And my dad was so disappointed in him. He was so disappointed in him. It was interesting that he felt that way, but I think that's part of, like you said, it's like when you grow up poor or through the Depression, it has to affect you. And I know with my dad, and probably Roger, and probably you as well, my dad's one relief was listening to the radio. He loved listening to the radio, and that was his escape. And it was his passion. He had to get into radio because of that. And maybe that was how you felt as well.
I don't know. I had so many failures in my life. I don't know how that really happened. I know that, and I've shared this sort of, well, I was a boxer at one time and going nowhere. And that's what I always wanted to be. I always thought that my life will be so much better if I'm a fighter. Well, I know all the moves. I know how to make them. I have a block punches. I throw punches, but I just wasn't that good. And so as a consequence, my mother had a lot to do with that. And so she kind of broke me in and told me I had a nice voice and all of that. And like
Wow.
your father and like Roger, we moved all over. I'm speaking about and myself, we moved all over again. So there was a first childhood and then a second childhood. In other words, you get experience in radio. You had to move from one place to another. You couldn't stay in one place because you lose all of your creativity. You got a little too relaxed, and there was no challenge. So I was constantly on the move. I might have worked at maybe 25 or 30 stations, but I never, and sometimes just for 2 weeks I'd be fired. But the point is, I picked up from every one and then developed whatever the hell I developed.
Yeah, but it was such a learning experience.
Yeah, that's it.
My dad had the same thing. I think out of the three of you, my dad and Roger and you, I think Roger was probably the most grounded. I think his parents lived in Odebolt, Iowa, and they had their butts plopped, and he had probably the most nurturing of relationships, with his family in that sense. I don't think he moved around like you all did, Radio station wise, I think he did, but I think he was pretty darn grounded. That's probably why he made one of the best straight men in the business.
That's it exactly, honey. You caught it right on the nose. I admired Roger too, from the very beginning. First of all, he hired me. He didn't hire
Which is
me.
a good thing.
Well, I appreciate that, but he didn't even listen to an audition tape. And as
Wow.
I mentioned, he knew how to handle people like Al and myself. And I suppose we needed it at the time. Um, what I remember about Roger was his loyalty, his truth, and a man who was far more intelligent than you can imagine. I mean, you could have a conversation with Roger Barkley, and you'd think, oh God, are you wasting your talents? I mean, I would think that. And all through the time that I knew Roger, I've always felt that he would be the best friend you could ever have if you just wanted to sit down and talk. Al and I were a little too introverted to open up. Although Roger was an introvert too, but that's why I think they got along. And if I just may for a second, to me, the best great man I've ever heard. And there were a lot of good teams, Bob and Ray. Neither was his first name. Claiborne and Rayburn, I'm sorry, Rayburn and Finch in New York, a good radio team. Hudson and Landry for a brief time.
They were awesome.
I would think also the two guys over at the KROQ, K-Rock, Kevin and Bean.
Oh, Kevin and Bean, great team.
But they had a great support. I mean, they had Jimmy Kimmel, they had Adam Carolla, not to take away from them, but they always had the support. Alan Roger did not. So what was so great about Roger Barkley? One was he was a motivating force. Al could be having maybe, and we talked about this a little bit, could be having a morning when you just didn't feel like it, but it was Roger who would set things up. If he felt that a bit was going too long or wasn't going to pay off, he could slide in beautifully and make up the difference, and nobody would know it. Nobody would know it. The only two people in Los Angeles that tried to be the next Lohman Barkley was Mark and Brian, of whom I had little regard for after they embarrassed.
They pulled a number on my dad that unfortunately and Roger, and it was not a good thing that they did that. I mean, basically what the story is, instead of letting everybody go, whoever's listening going, what did they do? After the Lohman and Barkley broke up, Mark and Brian were big fans of theirs, which was a wonderful thing we didn't know. And when it was still raw and both had very hurt feelings, my dad and Roger, unfortunately, they tried to get them back together by throwing them together and them not knowing what was going on. And it was too raw, and it put both men in a very, very bad position.
Oh, absolutely.
It was all on air. It wasn't like they did it. If they did it behind the scenes, it would have been okay. And maybe it could have been a healing thing. But instead, they did it so open. And you've got these two proud, hurt and shy men. And it was very ugly what happened with those two. Really ugly. So any admiration I might have had for them beforehand, because they were a force. They were a big force. I don't really have that much nice to say to them,
I don't blame you. No, and I certainly don't either.
No, one of the classiest, my dad and Roger, one of my things, Roger was always the stabilizing force for my dad. My dad was out there, he was creative, but he was never on time for anything.
I know.
Anything. And Roger would make sure he called my dad every morning to make sure he was up, and then he'd call him a second time because my dad was always late. And I think I told the one story. My brother used to be one of the soundest sleepers in the world, and he sleptwalked too. He's a little scary. And Roger called our house at like 4 a.m. or whatever it was, and my brother picked up the phone and yelled help, and then just put the phone down. So Roger called the police, and the police show up at our house. And that's how my dad got woken up to go to work that day.
He was always late, and you're right about that. But that's an insecurity that's in all of us. I don't think there's a person in radio or television doesn't have that kind of insecurity. What am I going
Because it's such a vulnerable place to be, when you're putting yourself out there like that, it has to be vulnerable. And if it's not, then I can't see how the person can show their talents. If you've got that much confidence, it's almost like off-putting, I think that some of the greatest, this is a silly dad story, but my dad was very, very jealous of Rick Dees when Rick Dees came up. Rick Dees was, so popular. Oh, he's knocking some of the ratings down for Lohman and Barkley. And, just irked my dad. And my mom and my dad went, I think it's Carmel. They were up in Monterey, Carmel area. And at a restaurant, and in walks Rick Dees. My dad's like, oh, we're on this vacation. I'm trying to get away from this. And here's Rick Dees.
Yeah.
And Rick Dees walks up to my dad and said, I can't tell you, I am so excited. You are the reason I'm in radio, and just made this big to-do. After that, I love Rick Dees. Rick Dees is the greatest guy ever. I mean, it was hilarious,
And it was such a well-produced movie. I too am a fan of Rick Dees. I didn't get the opportunity to listen to him much, but it was such a well-produced show, and it was because of him. And I received a letter from Rick Dees, and it was right after I had married the Queen Mary to a tugboat at the King of Long Beach, in order to illegitimate dinghies or babies.
That's awesome.
The point is, he wrote me a letter, and I've never met him. I still haven't, and I'd like to, because I admire him. Yes, he did extremely well. He knew what he was doing.
Deserved it.
Yes, he did, and he understood top 40, and made no pretense of what a great talent he was. But so I agree that Rick Dees does not, and he received a lot of criticism. I thought Howard Stern did a little too much on it. Howard Stern also did a great deal on as you know, what the hell is it? Yeah. Over Mark and Brian, I'm sorry.
Right.
I just felt about them that they didn't need that. They didn't need that. It wasn't funny because if you're listening to FM radio, you're not listening to AM. So they really didn't understand Lohman and Barkley, who they were, why they were, and where the humor came from. And that's what disturbed me. I only heard it afterwards. Somebody played it.
It's interesting because I belong to some of these radio groups on Facebook and stuff. And, I was a teenager in the 70s, and, I listened to KMET and KLOS, which I found those guys to be incredible talents. And they marked, in FM radio, they marked a different world, a completely different world.
Oh yes.
But it's interesting. There's a couple that when I've been on these groups, it's kind of like they kind of push down talents like my dad and Roger and you and Hudson and Landry and these because they weren't breakthrough rock jocks. And it's like, no, you don't get the point. You don't get the point. I think it's wonderful and innovative what they did, but it's not from the same heart that the AM teams or single performers brought to the table, because you guys came from another place where when you listen, people counted on you they counted on listening to humor. They counted on listening to the personality. They counted on, instead of being rebels, which that's what I considered back in that day, with we're listening to rock and roll, it's uncensored and all that stuff, which appealed to me back then, and I still think it had its place. I'm in total admiration for that, but it's not the same thing as what you provided or what Lohman and Barkley provided.
They needed, and this is the truth of my mind, they needed the music. I don't say that we were the greatest. I would dare say that, except to myself.
You guys were the greatest because it was the
world.
world.
Well, I don't know about all that, Kim, but when, let's see, when was this? Well, this is about in the late 80s, the early 90s, when Howard Stern came to town and blew both, I'm forgetting.
Mark and Brian and
Thank you. Blew them away, and they did not respond at all. Now they can say, well, management told us. I don't think that would have stopped either Al nor myself. I would not have sat there and taken that because it was just something that shouldn't happen. It's a tough business to be in. Nobody stepped on anybody's toes. We all seem to respect one another at that time, and I'm sure it's the same way today. But that's when I lost my respect for them. When Howard Stern got putting Stern down, he knew what he was doing. He took over the ratings, as you know.
He murdered everybody.
He did, absolutely, with something new, as you already pointed out. I'm going to say something else. You know, you should have a show of your own. You're very good, Kim. I had no idea. I've only met you really once, but you're very good. You're really very good.
Thank you.
I mean, no, I do mean it. It's
Thank you.
Now it's your turn. It's your turn to compliment my sweater.
Oh, your beautiful orange shirt. I have to say,
No,
it is quite.
My favorite color. This is the most important part of your interview here.
It is the most important part.
Yeah. No, it isn't.
You're wonderful. No wonder
I-
my dad was crazy about you.
Because you never really knew me.
But you never knew him either. That's why you guys get along.
I'm a narrow-minded, pinched old man, and you just don't recognize that. But I'm very serious about that. You should, you should know. I had no idea you had the talent, and you do. You're not only a good questioner, but you listen. And as you know, that's the mark of a good interviewer, somebody who listens. Dick Cavett used to have some of the greatest guests in the world. Unfortunately, he interrupted most of them, including Marlon Brando, which I happened to watch that interview. At any rate, you're very good at this. You really
You know, this is something my dad taught me. My dad taught me that it's more important to listen than to talk. And, you know, I think you get to know people. I think that's why my dad was also good with doing characters, because he tended to listen. He listened to everybody and everything. Now, then he did his shtick, but, you know, he was, and I think he made my brother and I realize the importance of getting to know people by listening. And I think that's a gift that he gave us. You know, other than the fact we did silly things, and to this day I still laugh at my dad. I miss him we talked every single day, and I would laugh my ass off. I just would laugh and laugh and laugh, and I just think that he was a special person. I wish he hadn't passed so early. That's too young, you know. And Roger was even younger than that.
Yeah, I was surprised at both. I probably was one of the last people to speak to Roger. Roger and I had one incident at KLAC, and it was my fault. I was waiting around to go down to the Palladium, which was just about a couple of blocks away, as a part of something. I can't remember what it was, but I remember I got off at 6 o'clock, I believe, and sat around in a tuxedo and was bored out of my mind. So I went over to a place called Martoni's. It was a spot for record people and radio people. And I had a few. I made that. I came back, and the show had gone away by this time. It was over. And Roger said, "Where were you, Dick?" And just that way, "Where were you, Dick?" And I tried to explain it to him, and I got a little upset. I said, "Damn it, Roger, let me alone," or something to that effect. Instead of backing away from it, he said, "No, Dick, look what you've done. You've embarrassed us." He and the general manager and the sort of thing. It was something that I should not have done, but it was the way he handled it that I always appreciated.
Classy man. Roger was a very, very classy man. And you know, he has such a lovely family that reflects all that, you know, they're just good people. And Roger was like a second dad. I mean, he was always so kind and loving. And my dad was a wild man. He was a he could be a little TNT, you know, a little bit stick of dynamite. And Roger always kept that together. And I gotta say, if my dad hadn't met Roger, there would have been no team.
Exactly. Very good for you. I don't know. I thought about talking about that, but I really do believe, and it's a compliment, that if there were no Roger Barkley, there would have been no Al Lohman as a single. And
There wouldn't have been.
exactly. Conversely, if there were no Al Lohman, there would have been no Roger Barkley. I really do believe. I've heard both of them as singles, but when they got together, that's where the magic started. Now,
Some
Roger,
wonderful man out there sent me a tape of my dad when my dad was at KIMN and WABC, which I was born in Dallas, and then we went to New York. So KIMN is before I was born, and WABC was, I was probably a year old, and my brother was about to be born. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, only because of, you know, the 50s. It was just such a different thing to listen to. You could buy you could buy a car for $100. I mean, it was just fun. And as much fun as I had listening to my dad, you could tell the talent gelled when he met Roger. That's
yes. I pointed that out earlier. There's no doubt about that. But it was fated to be, so it worked out very well. And I talked to Roger, I remember, after the breakup, and I remember the Times interviewed a number of people, including myself. And I said, it's simply burnout. When you do it every day of the weekend, people expect you to be at a high level, a much higher level than maybe they feel in that particular morning as they're driving the car and thinking dark thoughts. They expected Lohman and Barkley to kind of lift them up, and that's what we were paid to do. And I just thought it was a remarkable thing that they did get together and had the kind of chemistry that they had. And you could trust Roger Barkley. For example, I've eaten at both of his restaurants in Pasadena and up in the mountains.
Sierra Madre or something like that, right?
No.
Oh,
Arrowhead. Up in Arrowhead. He had a
Arrowhead.
restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I survived.
I gotta tell you, if my dad had a restaurant, you wouldn't have wanted to eat there. His claim to fame was 2-minute eggs, and he could make a hell of a frozen chicken pot pie. I mean, he just did not have it. Well, Roger had the gift. He knew how to do this type of stuff. My dad was like a kid. He was always a kid. He never stopped being a kid. You know, one of the funniest stories he ever told me was, this was after the breakup, and he loved Carlin. He loved George Carlin. He just thought Carlin was so unbelievable.
Oh, yes.
So he ran into George Carlin at the Beverly Center. And my dad was so upset. So they went and smoked pot. It's like, what? They went and smoked pot together in the parking lot and then went Christmas shopping. God only knows what they came home with. And then neither one of them could find their car. They just went up and down the parking structure and couldn't find their cars. So then they sat and they decided to go get some nosh. So they went someplace in the food court and ate. And my dad had the best time that day.
Yeah.
So like when Christmas, I got stoned, went Christmas shopping and had some nosh with George Carlin. He was a funny guy. But you were funny too. And Perry Allen, I don't know what Perry Allen was known for, but he was a sweet man.
Yeah, he was. He was huge in Buffalo and was brought out to KLA, and there was a $10,000 reward if people could figure out where in the world KRLA was going to get the next morning man. And it turns out that a newsman that we had at KLAC, Charlie Harlan, who was, I remember, found out about it and just ruined that whole KRLA.
Wow.
Because and that was Perry. So he came in under circumstances. I'll tell you about Perry just for a second. First of all, he loved Al Lohman, and Al Lohman loved Perry. And
Oh, yeah, very
it
much so.
it was a protective almost, because I'll tell you something about Perry. Again, we used to call Perry Suicide Perry. And you get a call, and this is no exaggeration. He'd get depressed, maybe he was out of work, whatever, and he would call either one of us. So we took turns. When he would call, for example, I went over one night. I got a call, or maybe about 11 o'clock. Dick, you got to come over. I'm going. I'm out of it. So I drove from where was I living? Well, over in West Los Angeles, yeah, over to Pasadena, and there he was in his apartment. He was lying on the floor.
Oh, no.
It was perhaps the funniest 5-minute monologue I've ever heard in my life about how awful his life is. He wasn't going to commit suicide. He wanted the recognition. And
Oh, my God.
Al had the same situation. He would alternate this, you know, Al, me, Al. And
Oh,
Perry was a great guy.
oh,
He really was you would have loved Perry Allen because, well, he was just Perry Allen. And that's the best thing I could say about it.
he was all heart. But I remember my dad telling me that you guys would save Perry Allen basically because he was always going to kill himself.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was just this ball of emotion, you know?
He made me feel like a strong man because
I think he made my dad feel that strong too. Now, were you big Bob and Ray fans?
oh, of course I am. But I thought that, as I had mentioned earlier, I think that Bob and Ray, they didn't have straight people working with them. They both were funny in their own way. They took turns. So Bob nor Ray were truly straight men. Roger played the part beautifully. If anybody
Really did.
I remember from the Laughing Days, Rowan and Martin, they didn't speak to each other. I heard for over 2 years. And it was interesting watching them simply because they knew exactly where they were going to go, how they were going to go, where to help, where not to help. And yet they didn't speak to each other. And there are many, many incidents of that. I don't think that ever happened to Roger and Al.
No, in fact, when they broke up, it's interesting because after Roger passed, after my dad passed, I actually called Nyla. I hadn't spoken to Nyla in many years.
Yeah.
And
A
my
very
dad's
shy
biggest
woman.
what's that?
A very shy woman, as I knew.
Oh, and
I didn't know her.
wonderful and
Lovely.
wonderful.
Yes.
And she it was interesting because my dad, what his biggest regret when he passed away is that he didn't contact Roger. And I guess that was Roger's biggest regret when he passed away, that he didn't have contact with my dad. And it made me cry because it showed how much they really loved each other. And they just never told each other. And it's such a shame, such a shame.
Roger said to me, we went to a funeral. I didn't go with him, but outside of the services, Bruce Wayne. Yeah, Bruce
Oh,
Wayne.
yes.
He died. And so I said, Roger, I'm really sorry. Anything I can, something like that. And he said, Dick, it all comes down to one thing. And what was that? And he said, burnout. I'm burned out. Has nothing to do with that. I'm just burned out. But he said it in a tone of voice that was regretful at the same time. So you're right. I don't think there was any real deep feelings of disliking it. I think it just got to the point where they'd been together for so long
like well over 25 years.
Yeah,
And solidly, and they were doing 6 days a week, and it was just, I mean, even though they pre-recorded the Saturday show, it's a lot to be with one person.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know,
I do know.
it's just they had their era, and they really made an impression on some people, and that's the gift, and it had to end. There's where was it going to go, right?
There you go. There you go, right there. Unless maybe you and Chris. Yeah.
Well, that's what I think.
Barkley and Kim Lohman, the new Lohman and Barkley.
You know what I think would be nice is if we started a podcast. That I think would be great. I have, you know, because of this documentary I'm working on, I have got hundreds and hundreds of hours of audio tape that has to be transferred. I've got video. I have so much stuff, it fills a room. And it'd be nice to put some of that emotion, not because I can't put all of it in to the documentary, but it'd be nice to be able to share it with people here and there, because it is fun. It's
you just brought up something, and I think it's a very good idea, and I think it would be very good therapy for you if you need it. I don't say you do, but you should do a podcast. I think that would be very good for you. You're very good at what you're doing, and you
thank you.
I had apprehension. I'll be honest with you. I had butterflies in my stomach, not for me necessarily, but for you, because, you know, I love you as I'm vicariously, of course, because of your father, because we don't know each other very well. I had no idea that you have the talent that you do. And I bet you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I do mean this. I know that things back and forth. But I think that anyone watching this in the future will say, my goodness, that daughter of his had a certain quality and ability to listen and to ask good questions. So
thank you. That means so much to me. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Well, I'm sending you a virtual hug.
Tell me, no, better yet, tell me my hair looks okay. I'm looking.
Your hair looks gorgeous.
There isn't much left, but there is.
It's beautiful, and you have hair.
Yeah. Well, a little, yeah. Takes me days.
Now, how's your beautiful wife?
Oh, Barbara, well, she's doing very well. Without her, there wouldn't be a me as a person. She is remarkable. And what happens when you're with a person, and I'm sure you know this, you develop, you know, the butterflies go away, the great lust goes away. But then if you have anything going, you have a friendship. And I finally have found a friend in Barbara. I'm not going to go too long on this, but we have I'm very grateful for the relationship. I would never tell her that, of course.
No, you don't want her head to get too big.
So thank you. I will pass along your regards.
Please, please. I just remember her being such a gracious person, you know? Yeah. And you're still in the same place, huh? You're still up in North.
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful up there.
Oh, it is. It is. I love it up here.
And you have the dogs still? You still have the dachshunds?
Oh, yeah. We have. Yeah. Life is just the same.
Yeah, that makes me happy. Well, I'm just glad I got to play with you today.
Well, and we had a good time.
I know. We're gonna have to schmooze again.
Yeah, all right. I'm certainly up for that.
Yeah, me too.
Did you know? One more thing. I thought about this. Your brother, and my son worked together at Remo. It was a drumhead company.
I
didn't know that either for a long time. And,
I didn't know they worked together. That's hysterical.
Yeah.
Oh, my brother, he used to call him, my brother would speak Spanish, and he'd call himself all these stupid names, and they would laugh at him. They just laugh because he was, you know, I don't know if your son is tall, but my brother's such a big guy, you know? What does your son do?
My son, well, he was a musician for a long time. And then he went to work as the creative director at Remo, the drumhead.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's done fine. The endemic, which it is to me, hurt him. He lost his job for a while, and his wife did too. And it was a little difficult, but I admire him because he, I would have helped if I could have, but I admire him so much. He didn't ask for anything. He just went
Wow.
ahead and went out and got himself an alternate job until things sort of smoothed out and living a
Good
good.
for him.
And your brother was a fine musician, a very fine musician. He
He's
worked.
still gigging. He plays with a lot of big acts in Missouri, and he has his PhD in educational psychology.
Does he?
So he's a special ed teacher. So what he did is, for when he was gigging a lot out here back in the day, and toured with a lot of people and did a lot of studio recordings, but he loved teaching. He fell into it as a substitute teacher, and he just fell in love with it. And he sort of specializes in special ed. And he lost a few kids to gang violence, and it really, really wiped him out. So he took a full. Larry Kanzler was directing the Lawrence Welk Orchestra in Branson, Missouri. Now, we did not grow up with Lawrence Welk. Even my dad didn't listen to Lawrence Welk. But my brother took the gig, and for 8 years he played with them, and then he left, and he missed teaching. So what he did is he started an alternative school out there for special ed that's connected with their school district out there, because there was no place for any special ed kids or kids seeking their GEDs in Branson. So he's quite successful at doing that. And then he gigs with, he's played with, I can't think of his name. He's played with a lot of different people, and he really loves, he just loves being a musician. So he's got the best of both worlds. He gets to teach kids, high schoolers, and he gets to gig. So I'm pretty proud of him. And he's funny. He's so funny.
Is he really? I really don't know him. I know your father was very proud of you. He really was.
Thank you.
You get very serious about that, and speak of just what wonderful kids he was lucky to have. I mean, he would say that he really was. But I want to remind you of something. You're listening to a lot of tapes, and you're going to be doing something with the Lohman Barkley Chronicles. There is a bit that we did. Your father in Palm Springs, it was the downside. The careers were practically over. I was in Thousand Oaks, and he was in Palm Springs. And so he wanted to do an interview. And so we decided, well, we would do an interview of all questions, but no answers. How are you? Well, fine, Dick. How are you? And then it was all questions from there out. No answers. It did work out fine. I know it made us laugh. So as a consequence, if you find it, it might be kind of funny. I think it's the only time we ever worked together, as I remember. But it was fun.
I love that.
Yeah, it was
Did
fun.
you put it on air?
I don't know whether he did. No, because he was funnier than I was, so therefore I wasn't going to put it on. I refuse to be a straight man. Too much ego there.
You guys were fun, but you guys were fun together, I think. My dad would laugh so hard when he was on the phone with you. I just remember things you remember when you're a kid growing up. It's amazing what you have in your head about your parents, and you made him laugh. That, and Jonathan Winters used to freak him out. Jonathan Winters would call our house, and he'd be in character, and it would freak my dad out. It'd be like 11 o'clock at night, and you got, what was her name? Ma something or other. And
Maud Frickard, yeah.
Yeah.
Maud Frickard.
And Ma Frickard would be calling my dad. My dad would be like, I don't know what to do with it. He goes, I don't know whether he's doing a bit or whether he actually thinks he is Ma Frickard.
Oh, he's that way. I saw him one time in Santa Barbara, and he was speaking. My son actually saw him. I said, you know who that is? I said, yeah, it's Jonathan Winters. He said, let's go over and listen. He was speaking to two people, but he was in character. Jonathan Winters was in character the whole time, and the people just started believing it. It was just a marvel. I mean, how Winters could just completely sublimate himself into this Lord Cricket Cup. Your father could do that. Your father had that ability. He could actually get into the character and be that person. That's something I never, ever accomplished. And I always thought it was remarkable.
And he could actually see that world, which
Yeah.
was really interesting. Even when he did Leonard or any of those, he actually became Leonard, you know?
Oh, yeah. I saw him in my mind's eye as a huge man. The man that was actually, who was a cooking person over KNX and then KABC. Leonard, I can't remember the guy's name.
Oh,
a cook.
Yeah. Well, there was Chef Mike Roy was one of them.
Yes.
And I remember we were in with my dad and their agent Maurice Duke, who in himself was a character.
Oh yeah.
And we went to Nate Now's, and Chef Mike Roy came in, and he was waddling in, and they had this special huge chair that he could sit in and nosh on whatever he was noshing on. And my dad goes, yeah, Leonard is part Chef Mike Roy, you know? I miss his characters. The characters were brilliant. The hardest part about the tapes, Roger and my dad did not look at the future, like who does, you know, but they didn't preserve the tapes very well. So it's a long process. I have to have them baked, and before they can be listened to, and after they're baked, then they have to go through another process, and then I can listen to them, and they have to be listened in real time. So did you save all your old shows?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Did you save all your old shows?
No, I can find them on YouTube. I'm sure you can too. It's amazing. Some of this stuff 40, 50 years ago. It's just amazing. YouTube.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like, and I find it a little perturbing, is I see people selling the Lohman and Barkley tapes on like eBay and stuff.
Really?
Which I find to be wrong for so many reasons. You know, and it would be the same if they were selling your shows.
Yeah,
I don't see how they can. I don't appreciate it. You know, I mean, it should be free. Yeah. Or if you're going to pay the families. You know.
Exactly. And if they do, I'm joining your family.
Good, because that's right. We're going to do it.
We'll have a lot of money.
We're going to make a buck.
Yeah.
Like Maurice Duke said, we were going to make a buck, you know?
Yes, there you go. Well, listen,
I could do this for hours.
Yes,
hours.
I know. But I'm glad we had this opportunity. And
Me too, Dick. You're fabulous.
No, I'm not fabulous. Wonderful, perhaps, but not.
I am so fortunate to have had this wonderful conversation with you, and I plan on stalking you again.
Well, I'm so grateful to you, Kim, because actually this afternoon I was going to kill myself. But now I have a reason to.
Then this is very fortunate.
Thank you so much. And you're a darling girl. And
thank you.
You're proud of your dad. And there are just so many things I'm not good.
Thank you.
I want you to know I appreciate you. I hope you'll give consideration to a podcast. And I'm going to leave you with the immortal words of the recently departed Meatloaf.
Oh, yes, Meatloaf.
It was Meatloaf whose final words, and this is true, whose final words, keep rocking.
I love that.
It's a philosophy that's going to keep me going for the next 15 years.
I'm going to be saying that over and over again.
Keep rocking.
That's right.
Bye-bye.
Wow. And they all lived happily ever after.